Did you know in Australia there are $3.5 trillion invested in superannuation funds? And that's money that belongs to hardworking Australians like you. So it's important that every single Australian understands superannuation so that they can maximise their superannuation benefits for retirement. Welcome to Dollars and Dreams, the podcast designed to empower you to take control of your personal and business finance. You know, the very thought of money and finance can often send chills down your spine and stir up fear of the unknown. But let's change that narrative together. Through this podcast, my goal is to not only to provide you with useful information, but also to inspire and motivate you to take action towards your own financial goals. Let's rewrite your money story together. Welcome to today's episode of Dollars and Dreams. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about superannuation and the importance that holds in giving us a lifestyle that we desire and dream of in retirement. And it's really important to remember that how you work on your superannuation during your working life will determine the lifestyle and things that you can do in retirement. So retirement is based up on three different pillars. The first one is your superannuation. The second one is a fallback with Centrelink or Australian government services. And the third one, of course, is whatever investments you've been able to put away. So things like shares or cash or rental properties. Those three pillars are what decides the lifestyle that you are going to have in retirement. But today I just want to talk about the one pillar that is superannuation and why that's important. So many people, when I talk to them about their superannuation, they just push it aside and, it's not their money, it's something for later on, or I'm too busy now, I'll deal with it later. Superannuation is something that starts from when you start working, and it should be something that you invest your time and energy in from when you first start working. The difference between the lifestyle that you will have in retirement and the lifestyle that you could have in retirement is based on how much you look at your superannuation. So there's a couple of different types of superannuation fund. The one that most of us would know about is what we call industry funds. And they're those ones that you see on television all the time, the compare the pair and looking at them. They originally started through trade unions and industry associations, and originally it was only people that were employed in those industries that could be members of it. So if you were in retail, then you would be in the Rest Superannuation Fund. But as time has gone on, most, not all, but most of those funds are now open to anybody that wants to invest in them. Keep in mind that just because it is an industry fund, it does not mean that it is the best fund. So the industry funds themselves have different levels, and every year the government puts out a naughty and nice list. So it will list the top superannuation funds for performance and fees and the worst performing funds for performance and fees. So it's really important that you at least take an active role and have a look to see if your fund is on the good list or the naughty list. The second type of funds that we see quite often is retail funds, and they're ones that are on investment platforms such as any of the banks. So you've got Commonwealth Bank will have one, Westpac will have one, Macquarie or AMP in any of those. They have a little bit more flexibility for you in that you can then determine where your money is invested. There's fees and charges there, of course, and it's not for everybody. If you're not a person that's interested in investing or making active decisions around your investing, then a platform super probably isn't for you. The other one that we see quite often is what we call self-managed super funds or SMSFs. Now they're a unique beast on their own, and there are reasons for having an SMSF, but there's lots of reasons that you shouldn't have them. And we get questions all the time from people that'll say to us, I should go and get my own SMSF because then I won't pay these management fees. And you're right, you don't pay management fees because you are managing your own fund, but you will have other costs just under a different name. So there'll be costs such as your accountancy fees, because you do need to lodge a tax return, lodge your business activity statements if it's a trading type super fund. You've got to do financial statements each year. You've got to do member statements. You've got to have your fund audited. And if there's property in there, you do have to get a valuation done. So they're not management fees as such, but there certainly are fees. And there's pros and cons to all of those funds. There are other funds that are out in the world, but they're the three that we see most people have the choice of using. Retail funds are a great option if you want to do share trading or anything like that. Industry funds are great if you just want to put your money there and let somebody else manage it for you. So with an industry fund, you invest your money. You have no control over where they invest or how they invest. The funds that are in there are managed by a professional fund manager. So they do buy and sell within there. You just don't have any visibility or any clarification of where you're investing your money. The one thing that I want to point out, and it's the one thing that most people get confused about, is that a super fund itself is just a trust. And it's a very unique type of trust fund, but the money itself is invested within that superannuation fund. And a lot of people will think that the superannuation fund itself is where their money is being held, but the money goes into the super fund, which is a trust, and then that trust goes and buys shares or trust funds or cash or term deposits, bonds, and all of those sorts of things. With an industry fund, you have no idea if they're buying BHP shares or Westpac shares or Macquarie shares. You just know that they're buying shares. And for some people and for most people, that is fine. But if there's a reason that you particularly don't want a type of investment held within your superannuation fund, you do need to probably look at something other than a industry fund. So an industry fund has different classifications, just like all other superannuation funds. So it's called your risk profile. Now, your risk profile is your tolerance to an investment not getting the return that it should be in a certain number of years. A risk tolerance doesn't mean it's a risk to you losing your money. So in a super fund, they're not going out there and trying to invest in something that is a risky investment. So we have what we call conservative right through to a high growth. So a high growth will tend to be where you're a bit more tolerant to some risk, and it's where you will take on that risk and a greater chance of having a better return. Doesn't mean that you're always going to get a better return, because of course your superannuation is tied to the share market, and if the share market drops, so will the value of your superannuation. It is important to remember though that that is just if you sold up today. So it's what we call an unrealized loss or an unrealized gain inside super. Until you actually sell the shares and take your money out of superannuation, that value will fluctuate based on share market, interest rates, and all of those sorts of things. When we talk about preparing yourself for retirement, I've just said some of the things that you should be looking at. So you should be looking at the fees and the performance of your superannuation fund. Is it invested in the right risk tolerance to you? Today's podcast is not about explaining it any more than that, because there is a lot to finding out what your risk tolerance is. But if you need any more help with that, of course, we're here. So you can find out anything else over at jenrichardson.co. But today I want to talk about you and your planning for retirement through your superannuation fund. And one of the things that we get asked quite often here is, how much do I need in superannuation? Now that would be lovely if it was a nice simple answer, but that's like saying to somebody, how much do you need to buy a house? There's the two ends of the spectrum for buying a house. You can buy the multi-million-dollar house that has a waterfront view, or you can buy the just the general day at run of the days in a outer suburb. So there is no amount that you should have for when you're buying a house, same as there is no amount that you need in superannuation for retirement. It will depend on what you want to do in retirement, how long you think you'll live. I mean, if you've got the genetics that say everybody in your family's lived to the age of 100, that person will need more money than the person whose genetics where everybody has passed away in their 70s or 80s. It's important to remember that for most of us, we will need to fund our retirement for somewhere between 30 and potentially 40 years. So if you retire at the age of 60, you may live to 90, and a lot of people are now living to 90 with the advancements in medicine. If you retire at 67, you may only need 20 years to fund your retirement. But knowing how much you need is not about how long you'll live on its own. It's about the lifestyle that you want. So if you're a person that wants to go overseas every year, or a person that wants to go camping every year, you will have different needs, because of course our overseas holidays are much more than our domestic holidays. If you're a person that wants to go out and have lunch every weekend, as opposed to the person that's happy just to catch up with friends a couple of times every year, you will need more money in your superannuation. So it is important that when you're looking at how much money you need in retirement, that you go through and assess what lifestyle you want. Do you want to buy lots of gifts? Do you want to replace your clothing? Do you want to have your hair done every couple of weeks? And all those sorts of things will determine how much you need. There's plenty of calculators online where you can put in what your needs are or what your hopes are in retirement. It will then calculate what balance you should have in retirement. And that's really important, because if it tells you that you need $1 million in retirement and you've currently got 200,000, it gives you one of two options. You either need to change your goals for your retirement and cut back on your costs that you're going to need, or you need to do some significant savings. Now, if you've got a gap of that 800,000 and you're in your early 30s, that's probably okay that you'll be able to catch up and meet that $1 million that's needed. But if you're in your late 50s and you're hoping to retire in the next 5 or 6 years, you probably can't without taking some significant changes. And there are some strategies that we do talk about with superannuation of how you can potentially build that balance more towards what you are hoping you can have. You'll hear things in the media sometimes around how much money that they think we should have when we reach retirement age. And quite often you'll hear things about, everybody should have 600,000 or everybody needs $1 million. And that doesn't help any of us when we don't know what that represents. So the Association of Superannuation Funds of Australia has come out with some classifications. And so they say that if you want to live a comfortable lifestyle, as a couple, you need $690,000 in super. As an individual or a single person, you need $595,000. But that still doesn't tell us what we get to spend our money or how often, because my definition of a comfortable lifestyle might be very different to your definition of a comfortable lifestyle. And so again, we come back to what we perceive and what our perceptions are of what life will be like in retirement. For a modest lifestyle, ASFA, or the Association of Superannuation Funds of Australia, says that you need 100,000 in super. And then of course we have aged pension. So I just want to go through some of the statistics so that you understand what ASFA say is a comfortable lifestyle. So they say if you retire and want a comfortable lifestyle, you have top level private health insurance where you can see a doctor and a specialist and you can cover your pharmaceutical needs. You have fast and reliable internet, telephone subscriptions, computers, and streaming services. You have one reliable car with car insurance and maintenance. You have regular leisure activities, including club memberships, going to cinemas, and exhibitions, get to do yoga or dance classes. Home repairs and bathroom appliances over 20 years. They also say that you can have regular professional haircuts, confidence to use your air conditioning in the home, and you can afford to pay all your utilities when they're due. The occasional restaurant meal, home delivery meal or takeaway, and you can replace your worn out clothing and footwear with modest wardrobe upgrades. The thing though that I think most people don't understand is that on a comfortable lifestyle, you can have one annual domestic trip to visit family and friends and one overseas holiday every 7 years. Now, if you work to your age 67 and you only get to have one overseas holiday every 7 years, for some people that might be fine. I can assure you that's not my idea of retirement. I've worked a lot of years and my idea of retirement is to go overseas at least once a year. That means I need more in retirement than the person that is happy to go overseas every 7 years, because overseas travel's not for everybody. So if you retire at the age of 67 and you're just going to do an overseas holiday every 7 years, that means you'll get 2 overseas trips in 14 years. Now that means that you're going to be in your late 70s, early 80s before you can do your 3rd overseas holiday. Now, most people when they get to their 80s find overseas travel draining, particularly in Australia, because most of our overseas holidays are on a lot of travel. There are a lot of travel time. So you're stuck in an airline, new environment, and that can be challenging for 80-year-olds. So our retirement needs are much more in our earlier years than our later years. So if you're only getting that overseas holiday every 7 years and you retire on what we call a comfortable lifestyle, so $695,000 in super between you and your partner, if that doesn't give you the lifestyle that you want, you haven't actually got anywhere from all those years that you've been working. As I said, if you are one of those people that you're not interested in traveling, that comfortable lifestyle as defined by ASFA may be enough for you. So what does a modest lifestyle give us? Well, most of it is reasonably similar. You get the basic health cover, and that means that you may not be able to get your doctor or specialist of choice. You only get budget haircuts, whatever that means, and you don't get to, so I'll just rewind that bit. So you get budget haircuts as opposed to professional haircuts. I'm not really quite sure what budget haircuts are, but you know, I'm sure it's not going and getting some of the haircuts that us women get. On top of that, you don't get any of your streaming services if that's what you want at home. You have the very basic internet and phone packages. You only get an annual domestic trip and short vacations. You don't get the overseas holidays anymore. You also don't get to update your wardrobe. You only get to replace clothing when it is worn out. Not too many people are retiring with less than 100,000 in superannuation if they've worked a number of years. Some people are just over that 100,000, no doubt about it. Particularly if you're getting close to retirement, so you didn't have the luxury of getting the compulsory superannuation when you first started working, or you had lots of career breaks to stop at home and look after the children. And of course, there's only been a recent change in the last 12 months where you get superannuation on all your wages, not just those above the 450. So if you were one of those people that worked a number of part-time jobs and each month the wage from each of your employers was under 450, up until recently, you wouldn't have had any superannuation paid. So when you look at those comparisons of what you've got between a comfortable lifestyle and a modest lifestyle, what you can and can't do is significantly different. Now, if that $695 that the comfortable lifestyle gives you as a couple doesn't give you what you want in that list that I just talked about, you need to make changes to ensure that your superannuation balances are higher than when you go to retire. So there's lots of strategies that we look at, and we're just going to talk briefly about them because some of them are quite complex. So one of the things that we look at is when you're in your working life, towards the end of your working life, we tend not to have as many costs as we do in our earlier ones. We've raised our children, we probably own our own homes. Our cars, we're not updating them as much because we're getting older. We don't have all the costs that are associated with having a bigger house like we had. And so quite often a lot of us will downsize our house. There is a downsizer contribution that you can put into your superannuation fund, and that's where you sell your house and buy a smaller house for a lesser amount. You can put money into your superannuation. That's a great strategy to boost your superannuation, but there's some rules around it. So, it's got to be your own home. It has to have been, it doesn't have to, it's got to be a home. Downsizer contribution is a great strategy, but there are some rules around it. So if you need to know more, you need to reach out to us at jenrichardson.co, and we've got a check sheet on downsizer contributions when you can do that. And it is a great strategy, so don't discount that for now. The other thing that when you're getting closer to retirement is you could do salary sacrifice. So what salary sacrifice does is, instead of being paid to you as a wage, your employer will put that money into your superannuation. The advantages of salary sacrifice is that it reduces your taxable income, so you pay less tax. The contributions, when they go into superannuation, yes, they will have a taxing point of 15%, but that will be significantly less for most people on what they're paying on their income. There's always a transition to retirement that is another great strategy for boosting your superannuation. The advantages of that only happen once you're 60 though. So that's where you put a salary sacrifice in and you pull out superannuation once you're over the age of 60. That is not taxable, so that income you're not paying tax on. So that's another great way to boost your superannuation. There's other things that we can do, such as a spouse contribution. So if you've got one spouse that has a higher income than the other, and you've got one on a low income, they can put in a spouse contribution and get a tax concession for it. So that's another great way to boost your super. Then there is putting in what we call a non-concessional contribution. So that's if you maybe get an inheritance, you can put it in to boost your super. So there is lots and lots of strategies around boosting your super if you have a shortfall in what you want in superannuation. And superannuation is a great tax vehicle. Superannuation funds don't pay a lot of tax. And when they go to what we call pension phase, so that's where you have retired and you start to pull money out, it's actually a tax-free environment. There are some other strategies that we always look at with super, and that is, in Australia, we sort of have a death tax when it comes to superannuation. So when you pass away and your super goes to somebody, so it's if your spouse or partner or your financially dependent children, so generally they're children that are under the age of 18, your superannuation goes to them completely tax-free. But if your superannuation goes to a non-financial dependent, such as your adult children, they will have to pay tax on the taxed component inside your superannuation. And that's a really complex thing. So I don't want to go over that too much, except to point out that if you have a financial planner, please make sure you talk about how you can convert your taxed part of your superannuation to an untaxed part. And it's a really key strategy to making sure that your superannuation, when you pass away, goes to your beneficiaries without them having to pay tax on it. So my takeaways from today are, of course, is that your superannuation is there for you to give you the lifestyle that you want. So you must take an active role in that. You must look at your superannuation fund to see if it is performing as it should and if the fees are appropriate for the amount of money that you have in there. You need to look at strategies on how to boost your superannuation so that you can live the life that you want in retirement. You need to look at strategies to make sure that your beneficiaries don't have to pay tax when they get the money when you pass away. There's also strategies around nominating who you are going to leave your superannuation to. Because one of the things that I find most people don't understand is that your superannuation is not dealt with in your will. It is completely separate. So it is up to you to notify the trustee of your superannuation fund who you want your superannuation to be paid to on your death. One of the other things that I talk about quite often with clients that I'm working with is particularly where you are separated or are divorced. You need to be very careful that you have changed who that nomination is to receive your superannuation, because if you have what is called a binding nomination, so that means the trustee must follow it, they can't change where you've said, and you have left that to a partner that you're no longer living with but are still legally married to, and you have a new partner, your legally married person will get your superannuation, not your current partner. The other thing that we see quite often is when you have young children, you might be leaving it to your children to receive. Now, they will get that money because they are under the age of 18. They will get it without paying tax, and it's all great, except that they're under the age of 18. So whoever is their legal guardian will in effect get it. And that could be your ex-partner. And nobody wants to give that money to your ex because they can do what they want with it. It doesn't have to be left for your children, for when they turn 18 to go overseas or buy a house or car or whatever you'd hoped that they could do with that money. The legal guardian, who may very well be your ex, has that money, and they can go and buy a house and use it, that the kids are living in the house, so therefore they have that super. So some of the strategies around superannuation are super, super important. I've got a course, of course, called Super Savvy Woman, which is designed for women to get control of their superannuation. Or, of course, you can reach out to us here at jenrichardson.co. If you are a female that wants help with your superannuation, that's the place to go. If you're a male, these all still apply to you. There's no rules for a female or a male. Some males have less money in super than their females, partners. So I'm not saying that this is important for women or women only. This is an important subject for every single person in Australia to make sure that they're in control of their superannuation. My Got Money Honey platform on jenrichardson.co is designed for women and women only. But if you're a man, you can reach out to me at 123 Financial Group and we'll help you through that vehicle to get control of your superannuation. Of course, if you're a male, you can still download all of our free resources at jenrichardson.co because they are not uniquely written for women because there's no way to do that. There's lots of free resources, tools, templates, check sheets, and free masterclasses. So if you want to know more about your superannuation, please jump over to jenrichardson.co. Take control of this as you would take control over the wages that you have when you're working. Remember, super and what you have in super when you retire will determine what you can do in retirement. So that's it for me today. I hope that I have sparked some interest in you and that you're ready to take an active role in your own superannuation and to make sure that you live the lifestyle in retirement that you want to live. So I'll see you next week. Thanks for joining me.
Remember, the advice shared in Dollars and Dreams is general in nature and it does not consider your own personal circumstances. Dollars and Dreams is for educational purposes only and should not be relied upon to make investment or financial decisions. If you need more help, please reach out to a financial advisor for tailored personal advice. Don't forget to click that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future content. And please leave me a review. Your feedback really helps me to reach other people chasing their money dreams. You can find me over on Facebook and Instagram to connect with me. You will find the link in the bio or head over to my website at jenrichardson.co where you will find free content and learning tools.